Hello everyone, my name is Moji. You're watching a Bitcoin bubble news channel. In the past few years, Bitcoin was even better in yen terms than in dollars. If you're Japanese and you have Bitcoin, you're living like a king or queen compared to most people around you. You might have the same thing happen if we get that other kind of shift. I'm pretty optimistic about Bitcoin, and the shortest time frame I gave was maybe 2 years. In the next 2 years, I think Bitcoin will go up in value. I look ahead a few years though and say, well, I think global liquidity is going to be higher years from now. Bitcoin is likely to go up in value. A big drop happened in the price of Bitcoin. It went below $60,000 at first, and then rose to $58,300 at one point. The total value of the cryptocurrency market dropped to $2.06 trillion earlier today, a drop of 3.18% in 24 hours. Bitcoin's value dropped by 3.8% during the same time period. This market volatility has made crypto fans respond in a lot of different ways. Lyn Alden, an investment expert, talked to podcaster Peter McCormack about how volatile, liquid, and important Bitcoin is in times of disaster. She talked about Bitcoin's long-term promise as a solution, not just a way to stay safe. Alden said that the greater discontent of the people was shown when a small rise in train fares and cold weather led to large-scale protests. She said that people's feelings of economic insecurity have been made worse by the fact that people's extra money has been staying the same or going down over the past 10 years in the US, the UK, and other parts of Europe. A few years ago, there were huge protests in Chile. The cause was that the prices of these trains went up by about a nickel. I was there. But yeah, of course, that means the nickel didn't do it. The nickel let out all of people's anger that had been building up. I believe that's what we're seeing now in some wealthy countries. It's happening in the US, the UK, and some parts of mainland Europe. There was this chart I saw altogether. Michael Green was the one who told them. It was mostly America, but it was real money left over after paying for housing, food, transportation, and other things. It shows that it's been going down since about 10 years ago. Most people's regular experience of affordability and quality of life hasn't changed much. It went from getting better over time to not really getting better. The United States is also going through the first time in its history that life expectancy is actually going down, which is a very bad sign. The EU and the UK both have trade deficits, which is the same thing we have. So you've seen a bit of your industrial base disappear, which is similar to how working class people in industrial places have a harder time. In that case, it's the same situation as in the US. So more and more people feel like something is wrong. So they don't really know what it is or what processes are in place, which makes people less trusting of institutions. Anyway, there are people in the US, the UK, and other places who say things like, I trust the government to do a good job, I trust the media to report the news fairly, I trust medical authorities, and so on. This trust is usually falling to very low levels across the board. When there is more division and anger, it leads to more economic anger, and then you have policies that people really do like. It's good to let people come to your country, but what happens when a lot of them don't fit in? There is some reason for people to be worried about that, and it can be used in bad ways. But then people start to wonder, what's going on socially while all these other economic things are happening? Then, of course, people will take it out on each other in violence and hate, even though some of these issues are hard to fix. I believe that a lot of them are caused by broken money, but not all of them. Over decades, though, it's clear that as a group, we use more energy per person, which is a good thing. Our tech is a lot better now than it was in the past. Even though some of it is bad for us, we do have better technology now than we did in the past. But if you're not in one of these big countries, our money isn't worth as much as it used to be. But money is bad in general. It's like that one place where technology hasn't really helped. All of these imbalances happen because of it, and one part of the system gets hollowed out. The other thing has an unfair edge, and then they switch places. People are affected by these big forces, but they don't know how to describe or put it in context. Arguments about money matters are a lot harder to have than arguments about things like social wars. So when things get more complicated with fiscal policy or the economy in general, fewer people are able to explain it. So they are said in ways that are more public and social. That's where a lot of that anger is shown most of the time. Again, there's a lot of, broken money. Plus, I believe that many countries have bad energy policies and haven't been able to handle their energy well. They start to think that carbon emissions are the only thing that matters, and they try to measure everything by a single number. If you ask most people, they'll say they want to keep the earth healthy. They want clean air and water, of course. But so many politicians base all of their energy policies on just one number. Then, if people's real standard of living starts to suffer if their energy costs are going up, for example, that's when they're ready to take it out. One is that Bitcoin does offer 24/7 availability. You can be safe knowing that if you keep Bitcoin, you can sell it at any time, even on a Sunday night in the United States when things are going crazy in Japan on Monday morning. This is something you can't do with almost any other asset. The bad news is that the price isn't great for people who are still holding. People who like to buy dips will like it. I don't think of Bitcoin as a risk-off asset in the same way that portfolio managers might. This means that the price usually goes up during disasters because people still don't fully understand it. Still, it's just that there's sometimes power in the space. One thing I like to point out is that there are crises that are good for liquidity and crises that are bad for liquidity. There is a strong link between Bitcoin and liquidity, which means that most disasters are anti-liquidity. And when there's a crisis, it usually doesn't help liquidity, so Bitcoin will be one of the first things to be sold. This is because, as the saying goes, you sell what you have to, not what you want to, and this is especially true on the weekend when the market is open 24 hours a day. As long as Bitcoin's value goes up, you wanted to have because you want to grow a lot. That is going to come with. There are times when the price drops, and it has both big amounts of up and down volatility. People are going to treat it often. It's kind of like a risky asset until it hits a much bigger, more spread out steady state, or at least For example, the 23 American Regional Bank was an example of a pro-liquidity problem. It was kind of like gold in size. So Bitcoin didn't do well in, say, late February and early March because that's when liquidity was actually getting worse. Bitcoin did well, though, when the crisis did happen. That's because the market knew right away that the Fed and Treasury were going to provide cash. Things went wrong. They knew that they had to answer that question. They did it. After a few hours, Bitcoin did pretty well. In fact, it did pretty well very quickly. That was an emergency for cash. These are usually events that cause less liquidity, like the COVID crash or this shift we just saw. That's why we shouldn't think Bitcoin will do very well during those times. It still does its job of giving people cash 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if they need or want it. But I think it's more like, and Parker Lewis may have said this, it's not a fence, it's a solution because it's an alternative system that's being thought of. Think about Bitcoin in steps of less than 4 years, because it's a structural growth story that will likely be sold during most negative liquidity crises, as long as the thesis is right. So you're buying things that will cause trouble in 4 years. Yes, you buy an answer for something. Like if money is broken, you buy the good money, which is the least broken money. Yes, you also try to build. Things like when someone asks me, what do you think about the recent drop in the price of Bitcoin? And my answer is that I keep keys in places that are geographically different. I've been investing in venture capital with EgoDev Capital for about 10 years now, as planned. That's the kind of time frame I have in mind when I think about Bitcoin. In general, I warned you about that. Any kind of long-term view shows